This video might seem like the ravings of a madman, or at least a huge nerd. Please don't take my lunch money, I'm just a guy who really likes a highly sophisticated interlocking brick system and a fictional vehicle from a movie about space wizards. I started this project with a simple goal, to find the best official LEGO A-Wing. That got a lot more complicated when I realized that even the best one could be better. Coming up with a design I was happy with took a lot of time and effort, but I adore this ship, so I really wanted to do it justice.
I need equipment.
How about a starship?
What else?
My love of the A-Wing probably goes back to Christmas 2006. Tearing the wrapping paper from one of my presents, I came face to face with this beauty. 6207 A-Wing Fighter. It became one of my favorite sets, and probably played a big role in how much I love the A-Wing to this day. But of course, there's also this incredible moment from the movie, when a squadron of these tiny little A-Wings takes down a super Star Destroyer. And who could forget the thrill of hopping behind the controls and flying one of these things in Battlefront 2? I mean, you gotta love those concussion missiles, am I right? With its blade-shaped body and beefy engines, it feels like a cross between a jet fighter and a souped-up dragster, and that big red stripe down the center just screams speed. About 2 years ago, I dusted off my old LEGO collection and got back into the hobby in a big way. Instead of languishing in a plastic bin in the basement, my old A-Wing now has a place of honor in my retro LEGO Star Wars cabinet. I still love it, but it doesn't exactly fit with the intricate, detailed sets I've been getting lately. Unfortunately, LEGO hasn't shown the A-Wing much love in recent years. With the exception of the gigantic Ultimate Collector Series A-Wing from 2020, we haven't gotten a proper version of this ship since 2017. We get a new X-Wing or TIE Fighter every 2 or 3 years, but the A-Wing just doesn't have the same mass appeal. We're finally getting another A-Wing as part of the upcoming Death Star Throne Room set. To be honest though, I don't want to pay $160 just to get something that looks like this.
Oh, yuck.
But let's remember that LEGO isn't just any toy. It's a building toy. So if the company isn't making what you want, maybe you need to build it yourself. That's exactly what I did. But before I show you what I came up with, I want to talk about some basic LEGO design principles. With every build, I think you need to ask yourself 3 questions. Is it sturdy? Does it look good? And something us adults forget sometimes, is it fun to play with? Yeah! When adapting something from a franchise like Star Wars, there's another question to consider. How closely does it match what we see on screen? If you could somehow take all of the detail on this UCS A-Wing and scrunch it down into a minifig scale set, it would be incredibly accurate, but it would also look terrible. LEGO design is the art of abstraction. You keep the most essential details and lose the rest. You have to find a balance between durability, playability, aesthetic appeal, and in this case, accuracy. Your idea of perfect balance might be different from mine, and that's okay. Now, let's look at our source material. Despite resembling a Dorito with 2 rocket engines strapped to the back, the A-Wing is a surprisingly complicated ship. About a year and a half ago, my girlfriend asked me about my favorite Star Wars ships. I didn't know why, but I was happy to oblige. This is literally my ideal conversation. When my birthday rolled around, she presented me with this, a detailed illustration of the A-Wing from every angle based on photos of a high-quality replica of the original production model from Return of the Jedi. So as I was working to capture the shape of the A-Wing in LEGO form, I had the perfect reference material. Viewed from above, the hull seems to be angular. But if we shift our perspective to the front, it's basically elliptical. And if we look at it from the side, it tapers to a chisel-like point. In addition to the overall shape, we want 2 oversized engines, this round thruster in the middle, and cannons that can swivel 360 degrees. The stabilizer fins should be angled, not perfectly straight, and way thinner than any brick-built fins could be. It would also be nice to have some suggestion of these missile launchers on either side. Getting all of this right in LEGO form just isn't possible. Every official LEGO A-Wing has its pros and cons, so let's go over them. First up is 7134 A-Wing Fighter from 2000. A lot of fans complain that early LEGO Star Wars is just too simple, not accurate enough. To me, that's like complaining that old movies are in black and white. Just because we don't do it that way anymore doesn't mean that's the wrong way to do it. I think this is actually a pretty charming set. and there's one way in which it's arguably more accurate than everything we've gotten since then. The plate representing the nose extends 2 studs beyond the rest of the body. Looking at the A-Wing from the movie, we see a similar extended nose. The LEGO version might be a bit rudimentary, but it has the right idea. And then there's all the printed pieces. As every LEGO fan likes to moan about, we just don't get many of these anymore. I think these slopes do a really good job of representing these funny, shield-shaped designs here. I've seen some fans use this tile piece to represent this detail. I understand the temptation because it's the exact right shape, but the size is way off. This is the piece they used on the UCS A-Wing. When you put it on a little ship, it looks way too big. So short of printed pieces or maybe stickers, I think you just have to leave this detail out. This set actually includes one more print. Check out this target display showing the A-Wing about to crash into the bridge of a Star Destroyer. I love that they included these details. However, these slopes to the side do not convey the right shape. I'm not blaming the designers though. There are other pieces that would work better here, but they didn't exist back then. There's one thing I can't overlook with this set, and that's the color. A really common complaint about LEGO Star Wars sets is that they're too gray. That's often hard to avoid because a lot of Star Wars stuff is gray. Star Destroyers, the Millennium Falcon, the Death Star, the list goes on. But the A-Wing isn't gray in the movie, it's white. For some reason, LEGO made a lot of early Star Wars sets gray when they really didn't have to. I will defend the gray Snowspeeder though, we'll get into that in a future video. This next one I actually own, so I can give you a much better look at it. 6207 A-Wing Fighter, released in 2006. Near and dear to my heart, this is my childhood A-Wing. Compared to the original set, this has a much better color palette, with not only white, but this time dark red, a new color introduced in 2001. This is kind of the midpoint between the original and the modern LEGO Star Wars design sensibility. Using these relatively new curved pieces, the designers were able to capture the shape much better than before. These 2x6 curved slopes, introduced in 2003, were stickered instead of printed. Inside, we actually have the same printed slope as the set before. The fins, engines, and cannons are pretty much the same as the original. The cannons in particular need improvement. You can see the barrels are positioned side by side rather than one on top of the other. Now, let's see how they tried to fix that 7 years later. 75003, A-Wing Starfighter from 2013. The cannon configuration is more accurate, but I don't actually know if it looks better. It's got these flick-fire missiles that were seemingly in every set back then. The fins have rounded edges, which is cool, but they're still fixed perpendicular to the hull rather than being angled like we see in the movie. And they're still built by bricks, which means they are way too thick. The 2 big engines are basically the same, although this set did pioneer the design for the central thruster, which later sets have borrowed. This build really emphasizes the small notch at the front of the A-Wing, which I believe is a slot that can be used to tow the ship when it's not in flight. This is a pretty subtle feature on the A-Wing, and the easiest way to depict it is with printed pieces or stickers. Otherwise, you have to ignore it, exaggerate it, or do something pretty out there. LEGO just isn't designed to capture such small details. Doubling the size of the notch isn't necessarily more accurate than leaving it out, and in this case, I don't think it looks better. I've seen a few really impressive fan builds that manage to make this work, but I prefer to keep it simple. So far, the 2006 model is still my favorite, but that might just be nostalgia talking. Let's see how it stacks up against this next one. 75175 A-Wing Starfighter from 2017. Finally, we've got a set that nails the fins, thanks to the 8x1 tail with stepped fin piece, introduced just the previous year. It's not 100% accurate, but it feels right. By replacing all of these little pieces with just one, LEGO made a much sturdier, better-looking stabilizer. But it actually did the opposite on the engines. Before, this was basically just one piece. Now it's been replaced by a system of plates, brackets, and small slopes. The engines aren't perfectly round, but I kinda like the way it looks. And I think these Technic wheels are a great way to capture the engine rings. This time, we get spring-loaded missile launchers hidden on the underside of the ship. Way better than flick-fire missiles if you ask me. And the cannons are a huge improvement over what we've seen before. I think this is the best LEGO A-Wing, but I do have some complaints. First off, too many stickers. In general, I think the bricks should speak for themselves. The overall shape of the set is really good, but it's not quite there. And then there's this red stripe. Way too thin. A lot of the good design elements from this set actually came the year before with 75150 Vader's TIE Advanced vs. A-Wing Fighter. I didn't mention it earlier because this is a Phoenix Squadron A-Wing from the TV show Rebels, not the classic red-striped Rebel Alliance model we see in Return of the Jedi. I'm not gonna lie, I really wish I had this set. Ooh boy, not today. Design elements from both of these sets would later reappear in 75248 Resistance A-Wing Starfighter from 2019. Resistance A-Wings are actually a different model from Rebel A-Wings, so we're going to move on to a set you've probably forgotten about. 75247 Rebel A-Wing Starfighter from 2019. Earlier in this video, I said the last proper version of the classic A-Wing was released in 2017. Looking at this set from 2019, I think you'll agree. As of this recording, this is the most recently released minifig-compatible LEGO A-Wing. I'm not going to go too hard on it though, because it's from LEGO's 4+ line. It's designed to be as simple as possible to cater to kids who've just learned not to swallow the bricks. The only thing really worth mentioning is that this set uses printed pieces for the external details, for the first time since the set from 2000. Adult LEGO fans generally don't like applying stickers to our sets, but most of us are capable of doing it. 4-year-olds, however, would have a much harder time with it, so LEGO gives them printed pieces. So if you want those printed pieces to add a little flair to your builds, you can either buy a 4+ set or just buy the pieces used on a site like Bricklink. That might be just what you need to take your build to the next level. That concludes our overview of LEGO A-Wing history. 75175 was the clear winner for me, so I thought that would be a good foundation to build upon. This set originally retailed for $39.99. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $53. Most used listings I'm seeing are around $70 to $100. As far as the aftermarket on LEGO Star Wars sets go, that's not even that bad of a markup. But I still don't want to pay it. Digging through my collection, I realized I already had a lot of the pieces I needed. After a few trips to my local LEGO reseller and an order or two from Bricklink, I had the rest. In the middle of finding all the pieces I needed, I discovered a mod from the fan builder Ron McFaddy that massively improved the shape of the hull with shockingly few extra pieces. They do great work, so if you've got a set you're not quite happy with, see if they've got a mod for it. I built the Ron McFaddy A-Wing minus the stickers that came with the original set, and I was pretty happy with it. Every now and then, I had an idea for how to improve it. I made one change after another, and eventually those changes compounded until I basically had a whole new ship on my hands. And here it is. Now, I need to stress that I'm really not any kind of professional designer. I don't have any specialized skills or knowledge. I think pretty much any LEGO fan could do the same thing if they wanted to. Let's start with the most obvious change. The movie version has this bold red stripe running down the center, fully enclosing the cockpit on both sides. But every official set had a much thinner stripe. You can see here the stripe doesn't wrap around the cockpit, it's fully interrupted by it. On the left, you can see my build of 75175 without stickers. Note, this is not the Ron McFaddy mod. I rebuilt it to the default when I took this photo for a before and after comparison. On the right, you can see an earlier version of my A-Wing. To make the stripe bolder, I shifted the white wedge bricks out 1 stud and back 2. Yes, that does mean I built 2 A-Wings, I'll get into that later. In building the nose, I started with 2 of these 10x1 slopes, which matched the curvature of the existing hull. That left me with a 4x8 empty space that needed to be filled. Even if I wanted to use 4 more of these in a row, the 10x1s were just too long. To make them fit, I'd have to remove the missiles. That was not an option. I love these things. I needed something shorter, so I initially opted for the 2x6 curved slope. It's actually the same piece used on my first A-Wing from 2006. It didn't match the curvature of the surrounding pieces, but nothing else was working. While messing around in the LEGO Design Program Studio, I found a piece I'd completely forgotten about. 42918, the 2x8 curved slope, first introduced in 2019. I hadn't seen it in dark red before, but Studio said it did exist in that color. In fact, it had appeared in a total of 2 sets, the 2022 Hulkbuster and the 2021 Titanic. 2 gigantic, expensive sets. So this piece will run you at least $1 on Bricklink, but it does exist. Given how rare this piece is, you might actually be better off using LEGO's Pick-a-Brick service. This piece was a game changer. Before, if I'm being honest, my A-Wing kind of looked like it had swallowed a bee. Now it finally had the sleek profile I was looking for. And look here, we've got the extended nose back. You don't notice it at first, but I made some major changes to the underside as well. In fact, I pretty much rebuilt the whole thing. Earlier, I mentioned that LEGO has been using curved slopes on its A-wings since 2006. That's only on the top, though. On the bottom, you'll find a mix of curved pieces and angular ones. That's because a lot of the pieces on the top don't have a mirrored counterpart for the bottom. It's really not a big deal, but I wanted to better capture that elliptical shape from the front. Those are some of the bigger changes I've made, but there's lots of minor cosmetic improvements as well. As you can see here, I replaced the barrels of the cannon with something more accurate. For a little extra detail, I added the printed slopes from the 4 Plus set. I tiled off the open spaces around the cockpit because I really don't like it when it looks like the pilot is going to be sucked into the vacuum of space the moment they leave the hangar. I also swapped out the canopy to be clear instead of tinted. This is one thing the 2000 set and the 4 Plus set actually got right that the others didn't. The official set used dark gray wedge plates to represent the slots for the concussion missile launchers. I decided to make real recesses. The only downside is they're not nearly long enough. Every time I tried to make them longer, it just looked weird. Sometimes removing these big curved wedge pieces can be really difficult. There's so many studs on the bottom and just so few on top to grab onto. As a side benefit of this new feature, you can pry them off pretty easily. I also swapped a lot of the gray elements to dark red for a more uniform look. Most notably, these brackets in the engines. This 1x2 plate with a clip on top actually doesn't come in dark red, so I replaced them with 1x1 clips. I thought that might weaken the connection for the canopy, but it really doesn't. I also had to replace the missile trigger assembly because these 1x2 Technic lift arms don't come in dark red either. Instead, I doubled up on a thinner version of the piece, which does come in dark red. Dark red is one of my favorite colors in the whole LEGO palette, but if you've done much building with it, you probably know it comes with some serious quality control issues. Even today, you can get color variation within a single set. And then there's a much bigger problem. Around 2010, LEGO tweaked the formula for dark red and a handful of other colors. It seemed fine at first, but over time these pieces became brittle. Now when you try to snap them in place, you can easily snap them in half. I don't fully understand the science behind this, but I'll refer you to this blog post from New Elementary if you want to know more. In 2018, the LEGO Group announced it had fixed the problem, but many of these brittle pieces are still in circulation just waiting to break the moment you use them. I definitely lost some pieces while working on this project. I also got a mix of the burgundy and rust-colored pieces, which can look surprisingly different when placed next to each other. Rebel fighters tend to have this beat-up, patchwork sort of look, so that might not be a total deal-breaker, but sometimes it looks weird. Despite these challenges of working with dark red, the A-Wing looks so much better without all these bits of gray showing. With that, I've updated my instructions and added a few last-minute tweaks. You can find them on Rebrickable, the link is in the description. My design replaces about half of the pieces in 75-175, so unless you can find the set really cheap, you might be better off sourcing everything yourself. Bricklink and Bricks and Minifig stores will be your best friends. Also, if you go to my instructions on Rebrickable, you'll see these blue pieces in the inventory. These are fully covered up in the final build, and they can be replaced with any color. That might not save you a lot of money, but don't bother buying new pieces if you've already got ones that will suffice. Even the fastest ship in the fleet would be incomplete without the right pilot. To fly this vessel, I chose Commander Arvel Krynid, who flew in the Battle of Endor as Green Leader. You may know him as the A-Wing pilot who led an attack on Vader's flagship. He lost control of his fighter when it was shot by a laser cannon, but was able to steer into the bridge and take out the entire ship. He's the unsung hero of the movie, and he deserves to be memorialized in fine Danish plastic. Krynid was a bit of a scoundrel. He was flying for a Bacta cartel before joining the Rebel Alliance. I don't know exactly what a Bacta cartel is, but it cannot be good. He also had a 4-armed alien husband, so good for him. This is Star Wars after all. Of course, every single character with barely any screen time has an elaborate backstory. This minifigure came from the UCS A-Wing set. On its own, it costs around $50. The thought of spending that much on a minifig makes me want to throw up. Thankfully, I got him when I purchased the whole set, which was really expensive but totally worth it. I like this minifig, but I really don't recommend buying it by itself. There's actually another Krynid minifig from 2013 that's almost as good for a tenth of the price. You could also get the minifig from the 2017 and 4 Plus A-Wings, which is pretty similar but just has a brighter jumpsuit. This is apparently supposed to be Jake Farrell. He's the old guy we see piloting another A-Wing. Nothing against the guy, but Jake Farrell is a terrible Star Wars name. You can have a normal first name or a normal last name, but definitely not both. In the original trilogy, no two Rebel fighters are exactly alike. The gray pieces on this ship represent the battle damage we see on Crynid's fighter. I was able to get a nice look at the original production model thanks to these photos taken by Cesar Toro. I found them on modelermagic.com, which is an amazing resource for stuff like this. I would like to include this distinctive red patch on the hull, but unfortunately this is all one solid piece. I thought about using a stickered piece from the 2013 set, but they actually put the red panel on the wrong side. Maybe the designers were working from this production photo from ILM, which seems to be mirrored. Someday I might redesign the A-wing to capture this detail better. For now, at least I was able to include this patch on the underside of the hull. Knowing that dark red pieces are often brittle, I ordered extras whenever possible. Between these extra pieces and what I already had lying around, it was actually pretty easy to build a second A-wing. For that pilot, I chose a member of Green Squadron that doesn't appear in the movie, Lieutenant Shara Bay. Bay is a major character in the 2015 comic Shattered Empire. She flew under the callsign Green 4 in the Battle of Endor. Bay very nearly fired on Luke Skywalker while he was escaping the Death Star in a stolen Imperial shuttle. But she made up for that by giving him cover fire while he escaped. She's also the mother of Poe Dameron, who we met in The Force Awakens. The A-Wings in the comic pretty much all look the same, so I just made up the details. For the minifigure, I used the legs, torso, and helmet from the 2013 Crynid figure, and swapped the head with Echo from the Marvel CMF line. That looks about right to me, and I love that it's got two sides like Crynid's minifig. You can pretty much guess which one of these people made it out of the battle alive just from the looks on their faces. And because I don't know where to stop, I actually have another A-Wing in the works. There's a few standout A-Wing pilots left, but I'm thinking of going with another character from the comics, Lulo Lampar, whose call sign was Green 2 until he was promoted to Green Leader after Crynid's death. He's a Duros, the same species as Cad Bane, and these guys we see in the Mos Eisley Cantina. I'll probably use Solitus's head from the Forceburner Snowspeeder. He looks a bit meaner and tougher than he ought to, but it's actually the only time LEGO has made a Duros in green. The other ones were all blue. That set might be a little overpriced, but I've wanted it since I saw the first pictures, and this might be the last push I need to get it. Three A-Wings is probably enough, or so I've been told. Besides, I've got bigger plans. I'll be shifting my focus to building the other starfighters in the Rebel fleet. I'll be designing some of them from scratch. For others, I'll be relying on designs from other fans, maybe with a few modifications of my own. You may have noticed some very subtle hints at those starfighters earlier in the video. Because I just can't let this project be easy, I'm going to make all of these vehicles in scale to each other. I anticipate some of these are going to be pretty hard and I'm going to get very frustrated. So if you want to see how that goes, stick around.
Well, that was weak as shit.
Oh, shit. After a few trips to my local After a few trips to my local Lego reseller,